Welcome to Looking at Lucasfilm, the podcast with a different perspective on the world of Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and all of the other entities that George Lucas, Kathleen Kennedy, and the rest of the team at Lucasfilm have dreamed up over the past 40 years. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and my co-host, the one, the only Dan Zehr, and I are recording this on Wednesday, September 4th, which is basically 2 weeks after all of this Star Wars-related news broke at this year's D23 Expo, and just a week after the East Coast version of Black Spire Outpost opened at Disney's Hollywood Studios. Now, Dan, you weren't able to go to the East Coast opening because, of course, you're a teacher and you're dedicated to your students and that sort of thing. But you did send somebody for coffee with Kenobi.
Yes, I sent Lisa Dollard, our media specialist, and she had a wonderful time experiencing everything that Batuu has to offer. I certainly missed the opportunity because they got to explore some of the buildings for the Rise of the Resistance, which made me very jealous, but very happy for her. But it sounds like it was great. In fact, on the Coffee with Kenobi that we recently released, I spoke to her and Aaron Sagers about what it was like on the East Coast side of Batuu.
Okay, well, cool. Well, we'll touch a little bit on that later in the show, right? First of all, I want to talk about your experience at the D23 Expo, which had to be a little frustrating because, again, you're a dedicated guy when it comes to teaching, so you didn't blow off your kids. You worked the bulk of the week and started traveling on the Friday.
That's right.
So you actually missed the first day, which featured the Disney Plus presentation about the new streaming service that Disney's launching November 12th. If I remember it correctly, it wasn't exactly a smooth day of travel.
Well, it was tricky because I got out of school. Our bell rings at 2:54 to end the day, right. And then I went and got my wife because she and I work together. She's a counselor at the high school where I work. So we raced to the airport. She dropped me off. And then I landed in Chicago because I was catching a connecting flight from there. And there was about an hour and a half delay, which was frustrating. But I knew I wasn't going to get into Anaheim until late Friday anyway. So honestly, I just sat in the terminal waiting, and I watched the Disney Plus presentation streaming. So I got to live it with everybody, even though I wasn't actually in the room. So that was pretty nice.
That's what I wanted to ask. Now, did you do that on your laptop? Did you do that on your phone?
I did on my phone. There was a number of folks on Twitter who were there who were live streaming it, and I guess Disney didn't mind because it seemed like everybody was doing it. So I just watched one of the other accounts as they were streaming it, and it was great.
Very cool. Okay, I mean, I have to admit that it's kind of the wondrous thing of this age, isn't it? That, it can be 2,000 miles away and still be part of the show, so to speak. So, all right, well, let's just jump into it. So they run that Mandalorian teaser. What was your take on that? What leaped out at you?
Well, there's a number of new characters, a number of new faces, some familiar alien species, but characters we're not aware of from that particular planet. And I thought that was great. The action looked crisp. It looked very violent and kinetic. And I thought it sort of seemed in line with what we saw at Celebration. And it certainly got me a little bit more excited. Quite honestly, I was so much more my breath was more taken away by some of the Disney Plus stuff, including She-Hulk. And that kind of had my focus. And then we got to a small announcement at the end of the panel, which I'm sure we'll talk about. That changed things for me.
That we did. But before we leave the Mandalorian, what did you think of the announcement that Ming-Na Wen, which so many folks know is the voice of Mulan, and likewise from her work on Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that she's also part of the cast? I was kind of intrigued that out of all the footage we were shown, we didn't get a shot of her character.
Oh, yeah, I was too, but and who knows how recent that news was or when she actually signed on the dotted line. But it was tremendous because now she's been in all of the great major Disney franchises, and she's such a great ambassador for fandom anyway. So that was pretty glorious.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, I want to credit, our buddy Drew Taylor for, I think, being the first to notice this. But, in the language when they were announcing The Mandalorian, the first episode will be available on November 12th in the U.S. with the launch of Disney Plus. Drew picked up on that in the fact that what that means is we're not going to be able to watch every single Mandalorian episode right on top of one another. We're not going to be able to binge. These things are going to be released a week at a time.
Which is great.
Okay, so that doesn't spoil it for you, or?
No, it's the opposite. We talked about this on Coffee with Kenobi as well. What I like about this is that you can experience this over an 8-week period, or however many episodes they have per season of respective shows. So it's not this immediate blaze that sets pop culture afire for about a week, and then it disappears and dissipates and goes into something else, because things are always coming around the bend. This way we can enjoy it more slowly. There's no pressure to hurry and see everything before it's spoiled for you online or on social media. So you get to actually enjoy it like a regular television program, but still the excitement of watching it online in the comfort of your tablet, your device, your streaming on your television, whatever you need to do. So you get much more of a long process. So the example Drew and I used was Stranger Things, the new season, where we loved it and we thought it was amazing, but after a couple days we already were out of that world because we'd seen everything. At least this way you're guaranteed a good couple of months of living in that universe.
Oh, that's an interesting way to, and certainly face it, this sort of drip method of distribution certainly hasn't hurt Star Trek Discovery.
Exactly.
The very idea that you don't get a new episode till a week later helps keep the show front of mind.
Yes.
Okay, well, cool.
What do you think? Do you like that as well, or do you like it in bulk?
That's the thing. I've only recently been introduced to binging. In fact, just this past weekend, dear Lord, Alice and I did all 10 episodes of The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance, Age of Rebellion.
I'm not sure. Age of No Chance Stands watching that. That's mine. That's too creepy for me. Those doll thingies are too creepy looking for me. They were when I was a kid, and they still are.
Well, you're not wrong. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed this. I mean, it's much more Game of Thronesy than the original Dark Crystal feature, and more to the point, during the last 15 minutes of episode 10, it was only then that light shined over Marblehead here, and it's like, oh no, they're not going to wrap up the story. There's going to be a season 2. That's not something you want to learn 10 hours in.
No.
But the one flaw, I think, with Dark Crystal is that the elf puppets, the faces really aren't all that expressive. So that there were times when the camera would go close in on an elf puppet, or excuse me, a gelfling puppet, during a particularly emotional moment, and it was just sort of like, okay, you're really relying on the music and the voice performance of the celebrities who voice a lot of these characters to carry it, because the puppet really was kind of a blank slate.
How was Hamill? I bet he was wonderful.
Oh, no. Hamill, as the scientist, was absolutely amazing. In fact, you have to watch all 10 hours right till the end, because he has an absolutely wonderful button scene for season 1 that then sets up, everything that happens for season 2. But I would put his work on The Scientist right up there with his Joker. It is just... a wonderful range, amazing performance. So, no. For at least you got to go and check out what, Mark is doing for Age of Rebellion, because it was one of those wonderful performances where it served the story, but at the same time, he was clearly having so much fun voicing the character that you just kind of got swept up in the duality of it.
Sure.
And speaking of duos, okay, we've got our Rogue One prequel series, where we've got Cassian Andor teaming up once again with K2SO.
That's right.
The interesting thing about this one is really out there. I mean, shooting doesn't start till next year in London. It's set in the formative years of the rebellion, so it's basically detailing events that leading up to what we saw in Rogue One.
They're basically running parallel to what happened in Star Wars Rebels.
Oh, that's right.
So that could be interesting. I do want to circle back really quickly on The Mandalorian. I am excited about it. It's probably my most excited about the 3 Star Wars series that are going to be on Disney Plus. But the only reason for that is I like the hope aspect of Star Wars, and this one looks to appear more to kind of marinate in some of the more dark and challenging aspects of what it means to live in this galaxy far, far away, which is great. And I know I'm going to eat it up like popcorn, but I like like I was saying earlier, I like Captain America. I like Superman. I like the more optimistic aspects of things. So it will be certainly a different take, but one I'm looking forward to.
Well, now that's very interesting to hear the talk that way, because now obviously we have to pivot to the big announcement that was done at the Disney Plus streaming service panel. Now, mind you, anyone who listened to the last show, we were talking about how people were already buzzing out ahead of the expo to the effect of, Ewan McGregor's, supposedly cut a deal with Disney. It looks like we're getting a, Obi-Wan Kenobi series. And that was supposedly the big thing of the day. Everyone was sort of leaning forward, waiting for this announcement. And here comes McGregor on stage with Kathleen Kennedy, and the audience loses its mind.
I got choked up. I was watching it, as I said, in the airport streaming, but I got choked up even though we had a good inkling that was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Just seeing it and hearing the Duel of the Fates music and seeing the smile on both he and Kathleen Kennedy's faces, his expression and his sentiment that I don't have to deny this anymore or act like, oh, gee, it sounds like a fun character to play again. It was just like such a huge relief and joy. It was wonderful.
Well, now remember, Dan, as far back as April 2017, McGregor was out there talking about how he'd love to reprise this character. And what was it, December that same year? We get, that news about Stephen Daltrey's in talks with Lucasfilm to direct the Obi-Wan Kenobi film, and that at that time it was supposedly envisioned as, the first of a trilogy of movies, and was going to be shot in 2019 and at Pinewoods with a theatrical release in 2020. And then, of course, May of 2018, Solo: A Star Wars Story comes out. Doesn't do quite what, Lucasfilm or Disney wanted, so you see them tapping the brakes on, these Star Wars story films. And let's be completely honest here, that you were there in April of 2015 when, in fact, kind of ironic that you were at the Anaheim Convention Center again for the D23 Expo, because you'd been there for the Star Wars Celebration in 2015, where, they're in the middle of the movie panel and they just sort of kind of throw away as part of the, that panel on Thursday, April 16th. Oh, by the way, Josh Trask isn't here today. And he was supposed to be the director of the Boba Fett movie that was supposed to be announced the very same day as Rogue One. I guess what's kind of intriguing to me is to see this project, the Obi-Wan film, now mutate into this Obi-Wan limited series. And you got to wonder how much of the story that was originally proposed for that trilogy of films, is going to wind up as part of the series. I can't face it. We don't have a whole lot to operate on at this point. All we know so far is it's set 8 years after Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, I kind of love the symmetry here, because if you go by the timeline, Luke at this point is 8 years old, and that's the exact same age that Anakin was when he met Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon.
Ah, good call. Yeah, good call.
Yeah. So I love that from a storytelling symmetry point of view. But, you're more familiar with what's been done with the Obi-Wan character for the stories and the comics and that sort of thing. And didn't they also, as part of, was it Star Wars Clone Wars, or was it, no, it was Rebels, wasn't it?
Rebels, yeah. It was in Twin Suns, the episode where Darth Maul finally meets his end. Mm-hmm. Where we see a young Luke at the very, very end running across the landscape and to the sound of Aunt Beru calling his name out. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was the only time.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of comic books that are one-shots that Jason Aaron did in the Star Wars main title for Marvel, where we see Obi-Wan on Tatooine sort of watching over the Lars homestead and having very tense conversations with Uncle Owen. Never seeing Luke really specifically, but there's one issue where Luke gets a sense that there's someone there, but that's about the extent of it. And I always think that's a very slippery slope, because if he can make it obvious to an 8-year-old boy, it wouldn't be as hard for the Emperor, I wouldn't think. However, what I'm understanding, and I don't have any inside information on this, but Kathleen Kennedy did say at D23 that all the scripts are done and they're going to start filming next year. So to me, that I was sort of hoping that meant they're just basically modifying what they've already done with potential films and just expanding and extrapolating that into this series.
Well, the sad part of it
Makes
is
sense.
If they're filming in 2020, how likely is it, given how effects heavy, typically a Star Wars film is, that we're going to see this till 2021?
Right. Right. That's a good point.
Well, on the upside, what will have to hold us over till then, of course, is Season 7 of The Clone Wars. What is it, 12 brand new episodes? 13?
I thought 12. 12 sounds right.
Okay. Did they show anything of that you saw, or?
They didn't show anything.
Okay.
I mean, I wasn't there for that part, but there was nothing released online or anything like that. I think they really wanted to focus on what they've got going on with the Disney Plus stuff and The Mandalorian. And then once that is done, and I guess the last season of Star Wars Resistance, then maybe they'll go full force on Clone Wars.
Full force. I love that.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, like that.
Okay. Yeah. A quick question here. While Kathleen was standing on stage with sort of, the whole timeline played out behind her, I noticed that they broke down the various periods of the film. Maybe I haven't noticed this before. Is this a new thing, breaking them down into the Age of the Republic, Age of the Rebellion, and the Age of the Resistance? Or
no, I mean they've used it in novels, in different timelines at the beginning of all the Delroy novels, for sure.
Okay.
So it's there, but it's never really been presented in this fashion. It was kind of Marvel-esque, really.
Well, no, I'm glad you used that phrase, because there were a number of people who, having seen what they've done with the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how they lay out the films and what projects are going away, it did have the same sort of graphic presentation. Anyway, before we continue here, I'm sorry. I just have to ask, because I know how tough it can be to travel to these events. So, again, you're getting all this news while you're sitting at the airport. Finally, your flight from Chicago leaves from Anaheim. What time did you get in?
Let's see. I think I landed in LA about 10 o'clock.
Okay. But
that's, well, I guess that makes it worse. But the nice thing about going to California when you're a Midwesterner is that when you wake up, if you wake up at 6 o'clock California time, it's 8 o'clock Illinois time. So you're actually, while some people think, well, you're up early, for Illinois, it wasn't early at all. So I kind of felt like Superman.
God. Okay. And where did you wind up staying? Were you staying close to the Anaheim Convention Center, or?
I stayed at the Hilton Anaheim Convention Center Hotel.
Beautiful. Okay, so you get up in the morning, roll out of bed, go pick up your credential. How early were you over there on Saturday morning?
I got there, about 8:30, 9 o'clock, because I had to go pick up my press pass and then go get my wristband for the studio presentation panel, so I could sit with the rest of the press. So it wasn't bad at all.
Okay, well, now speaking of which, so
I even woke up and worked out too.
Okay. I love your dedication. All right, I'm usually just looking for the coffee IV at that point. Okay, Okay, so speaking of the studio presentation, so how cool was it that they literally kick off this thing with Star Wars?
Oh yes, it was nice. I will say I was sort of thinking that would be more of a feature thing towards the end, but I think they had so much animation stuff, and Frozen 2 is just such a juggernaut that I understand why it happened the way that it did. But I will say I had a massive smile on my face for the entire thing because of the footage we saw for The Rise of Skywalker, and that's saying something because there were some major stars in this thing. The entire presentation.
Oh, no doubt. I love how everybody got kind of a moment to talk about. I mean, for Kerry Russell talking about her character Zori being a bit shady, an old friend of Poe, and and Billy D talking about how, how many years has it been now since Empire Strikes Back, and he's talking about how Lando never left him, or for that matter, how JJ was just upfront about how Leia is the heart of this story. So, I mean, so many things that the fans legitimately wanted to hear about The Rise of Skywalker. What did you think about how the internet kind of lost its mind, in the days that followed D23 with that one brief clip of Rey with her, a double nunchuck lightsaber?
That's a good description. There is a similar style in an episode of Clone Wars where the Jedi Temple Guards have a similar looking lightsaber. So there is some semblance of synergy there. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, I'm sure you've gotten this too, but I've gotten so many questions from listeners, from students, from friends who know I like Star Wars. Mm-hmm. That, is Rey going bad? What do you think about, is Rey going bad? Is this da-da-da? And what I say to everyone is, what I think is I saw 2 seconds of an amazing, stunning clip that was incredible to experience live in that arena. And other than that, I have no idea. I'm just going to sit back and wait and see what JJ is going to offer me.
That's a very healthy attitude. And the only thing I have to add to that is, for those of us who remember the scene from Empire where Luke went into the cave and supposedly battled Darth Vader only to find that, inside of the mask was his own head. There are these things called dream sequences, folks,
And The Last Jedi had that masterful one in the cave as well.
This is true.
Rey.
This is true.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that certainly went through my mind. No doubt about that.
Okay, so you finished the studio presentation. I have to assume you immediately went onto the main show floor and made your way to the Imagineering Pavilion to check out the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser.
Well, the first thing I did actually went to the Lucasfilm Pavilion to catch up with Daniel Kennedy, who's in charge of, he's the events coordinator for Lucasfilm.
Oh, my mistake.
So I chatted with him for quite a bit, had him on Coffee with Kenobi. Mm-hmm. He talked about the presentation of all of the Stormtrooper armor, the various types, and that was great. Mm-hmm. He and I both remarked at how crazy it is and how awesome it is that at D23 you can stick your arms out on either side of you and you don't run into someone like at San Diego Comic-Con, even though it was completely sold out. Yep. But shortly after that, I did go over to the Imagineering Pavilion and spoke with a couple of the Imagineers who worked on the Halcyon, the Galactic Star Cruiser. And boy, what a gorgeous model. What an incredibly exciting experience. It's almost like, Jim, they're going to take Galaxy's Edge and raise it up 10 notches to what they've got planned. I mean, it is stunning.
Yeah, I mean, face it, there's one storytelling experience that guests have if they walk through, well, one of the 3 portals in Anaheim or one of the 2 portals in Orlando. But, face it, Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser is going to take this to a whole different level. I mean, literally, the notion is that you basically go to, your cruise departure point, fill out the necessary paperwork, and then what? You basically board a shuttle that's supposed to take you out into space, where you then dock at the Halcyon, and from the moment you board the ship for, a 2-night, 2-day experience.
2 nights, 3 days, right? I think.
Yeah, I mean, you are knee-deep in Star Wars. And depending on who you talk to in the lobby, at the restaurant that night, or which members of the staff you interact with, starts individual story threads moving forward. Now, I want to stress here that you recorded interviews with these 2 guys, these 2 Imagineers, and if folks want to hear them in full, they can actually go over to Coffee with Kenobi. That's correct?
That's right. Yeah, and it was 2 ladies, actually.
Okay. Yeah. My mistake.
They were, let me see, I got their names here. They were Erica Charlesier and Lauren Niederheiser.
Okay.
And they were awesome. There really wasn't a ton they could say, but they were very gracious with their time and talked about the notion that the way you're going to enter this thing, as you said, you're going to raise basically up inside the vessel itself because you can't walk in space, and that was what they said. And they talked about that they told me to continue to look at the Disney Parks blog to find out specifics, which I certainly have done every day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I guess the thing that particularly intrigues me about this is that if you're a guest staying at the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser. When you finally go over to Batuu, it's framed in such a way that this is literally a port day. It's like you're getting off of the Disney Dream in, Old Port Royal. And, that sort of supposedly wandering around like a tourist, only, the thing I find fascinating is all those doorways in the back streets of Black Spire Outpost that right now look like wonderful theming and beautiful detailing. They actually have a purpose if you book passage on the Halcyon that, you're actually going to be, for example, nefarious characters are going to go, could you go down to the surface and I need you to deliver this to such and such a door? And, and that sort of kicks your adventure into gear. Again, it's going to be crazy, crazy level storytelling.
It's unimaginable that this is even an option for us. It's like you would dream about as a kid, but it's not going to be cheap, most likely.
No. In fact, I'm almost hesitant to bring up the price point. The interesting thing is that out in Glendale, they've been doing a number of focus groups where they literally do sort of a DVC level presentation of what your experience will be if you book passage on the Halcyon, and the special for you adventures that you'll have down on Batuu. So they haven't settled on an exact price point. You and I have. We were pre-gaming prior to the show, and we both heard the same number, but I'm hearing that Disney's hesitant to put that out there, so we'll hold that back for now. By the way, what I have heard, Dan, is that, again, because of the level of effects work and set dressing and that sort of thing, the earliest that they'll be doing preview cruises on the Halcyon will be late 2020.
Wow.
With
that's really not that far away.
Well,
it's basically a year.
Yeah. But at the same time, supposedly people will be able to begin booking passage on the Intergalactic Star Cruiser starting in the spring of 2020. However, these flights, seriously, Dan, this is the language they want us to use. All right, it's not a hotel. It's not on the ground. You're not allowed to say that. You're in low orbit. But yeah, they'll start booking passage in spring of 2020. With cruises formally getting underway in early 2021, just in time for Disney World's 50th anniversary. Another thing I heard, by the way, the second Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser hotel is reportedly going to be built at Disneyland Paris as part of the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge complex that's being built there at Walt Disney Studios Paris.
Wow. Do we have a time frame for either of those things?
2023 is when the studio, and that's when they're going to have their Frozen Land. That's when they're going to finish their Avengers campus as well as Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. That's when at that full build out. The hotel, I'm told, would come online 2 years after that. So we're basically looking at 2025 or thereabouts. Other interesting little bend on this story, the Oriental Land Company, the folks who licensed from the Disney company the rights to build a theme park alongside of Tokyo Bay, the folks who Tokyo Disneyland and Tokyo Disney Seas, they've expressed an interest in the Star Wars Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel, but not Galaxy's Edge, which I thought was kind of interesting. The notion of they want the hotel, they just don't want the land, or they don't want the land as it is now.
So you think what you've talked about previously, that they may be thinking about revisiting this, but with more familiar locations?
Yeah.
Locations?
Just today, Len and I recorded a brand new Disney Dish, and he was talking about the fact that even after, we had the opening of the Orlando version of Black Spire Outpost, where, they had guests, lining up at 3 o'clock in the morning, to get into the park to experience this. And they had that amazing opening day. But here we are just after Labor Day, and the crowds are not what certainly Len was expecting, and certainly not what Disney was expecting. And
But doesn't a hurricane, an impending Category 5
that's
hurricane, kind of put asterisks there?
Len was quick to point that out, along with the fact that the kids are back in school, and there are all sorts of factors here that have to come and be considered, have to come into play. It was just one of these situations where they wanted Orlando to open big because of the strange summer that Anaheim had. And, that this just adds so much more pressure on Rise of the Resistance. That's got to be, a smash hit. That's got to move the needle in a lot of ways.
And I got the impression, like we talked about in the last show, that when Iger talked about this, that maybe he thinks they should have waited and opened everything at the exact same time. Right?
Hindsight is always 20/20. I mean,
sure. Monday morning quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. And the weird thing is that as part of this press event, in fact, to get back to, I guess we should talk a little bit about what Lisa shared about her experience at the Orlando thing, because face it, one of the things they did is they actually, marched the reporters into Rise of the Resistance or select rooms in Rise of the Resistance, and gave them a sense of the size, the scale, the crazy level of detail. And also, the lovely thing is they finally confirmed the story I've been telling for months now about how your ride vehicle literally has to roll straight into an escape pod. And then you drop back down to the surface to escape the Star Cruiser. But at the same time, they also let it slip that there is, in fact, a fourth ride system featured in Rise of the Resistance that they haven't shared yet. That makes me a little crazy. But anyway, what about, do you want to do a quick Reader's Digest version about what Lisa shared with you about her time at the media event?
Sure. I mean, basically, her main observation was just the absolute massive scale and scope. And she said, I was literally on the bridge of a Star Destroyer, and I can't believe what I saw. And they also mentioned, she and Aaron Sagers, who came on the show, they also mentioned that with the 50 stormtroopers there, it was intimidating, it was beautiful, it was awe-inspiring, it was just what if this works the way that everybody wants it to work, no one is prepared for how glorious this is going to be. And that, I mean, talk about wetting your whistle in unbelievable ways.
That is so cool. Okay, cannot wait. Well, now, speaking of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, now, you basically told me while you were out of town that you'd spend a full day on the expo, and I know from having done the D23 Expo how exhausting that can be. But you would then leave the expo, go over to Disneyland Park, and be in Black Spire Outpost until they closed for the night, right?
Yeah, I was done for the day. Mm-hmm. I went back to my hotel and dropped off some stuff. And then I beelined over to Galaxy's Edge. And Drew was going to meet me over there, but then he chickened out because he said the line for security was too long. But I guess if you've had to deal with security as much as Drew has had over your life, you probably were a little disgruntled. So then I went and closed it down, had an absolute blast. And then the next morning, I had to catch a plane, but I woke up really early. And I went over to Batu and had breakfast there and spent a couple of hours there again. And so Drew has determined that I have a Galaxy's Edge addiction, and he is correct.
Well, I have to apologize here because Dan posted a couple of pictures from the show floor where I affectionately referred to him as a raccoon because, man, you looked tired. Happy, ridiculously happy, but tired.
Yes, my wife confirms your animal comparison as well.
Well, there you go. Okay, just a couple of things to wrap up here. So, again, you're on the show floor. I mean, I know you only got a limited time, but did you get to see any interesting Star Wars-related cosplay? Or
there wasn't a ton there. Marvel just sort of took over everything, I thought. Okay. There was just so much Marvel stuff, and they had a lot of great costumes on display. They did have, next to where you could sign up for Disney Plus, they had 2 costumes from The Mandalorian for you to look at, which I thought were glorious. But mostly the stuff that stuck out was the Marvel cosplay. And I know there was great Star Wars cosplay on there. I just didn't happen to run across it. And some of the things that people did with the Haunted Mansion stuff was staggering. I know this isn't a Haunted Mansion podcast, but boy, there was some amazing cosplay for that attraction. No doubt about that.
Very cool. Very cool.
Star Wars was, I mean, the Force was certainly felt at D23 and the Expo with the announcements and Galaxy's Edge right there and the great Lucasfilm display and that stuff for Star Wars kids. But it was really, seemed like Marvel was really just kind of the great image in the sun that was overpowering everything.
Well, it is the summer of Endgame, that kind of hard to escape. Okay.
Exactly. I do want to point out, by the way, from a story perspective, the Halcyon was built in the docks in Chandrila, which is, if you know your Star Wars lore, this is the planet where Ben Solo was born. It's also where Mon Mothma is from.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is pretty cool.
All right. I love that detail. Speaking of which, though, I mean, I think the first time you and I met face-to-face was at the Star Wars celebration in April of 2015, which was held at the Anaheim Convention Center. So how weird was it to be back in that building, but now to be here for a D23 Expo?
Oh, it was so glorious to just be there. Just really the only thing that was similar to the outside with that great glass and the fixture that usually has the advertisements for whatever the convention is. Mm-hmm. Then you go in the lobby. Then once you get on the show floor, even though it's of course the same layout, it's just so different. It's just sort of amazing how in these convention centers you can be in the exact same spot, but feel like you're in a completely different place. So it was kind of surreal, but it was really glorious.
Oh, but quick, weird little trivia piece here. But it turns out the new CBS All Access series, the Star Trek spin-off Picard, that they were looking for buildings that looked like they could be in the 23rd century. So they actually shot outside of the Anaheim Convention Center. You'll get
That's right.
You'll get to see the exterior when that show launches next year. But, okay, now, again, forgive me for going down this rabbit hole, but for you, how did the D23 Expo compare to Star Wars Celebration? I mean, you just did the one in Chicago at the McCormick Place.
Right. They're similar in the lines that people were very happy and very passionate about what they love, and they were very much shining and showing that through cosplay, through T-shirts, and in the merchandise. But it's different because D23 is the only place I know of where you can be having a conversation with an Imagineer and all of a sudden an actual parade will break out on the convention center, which kind of messed up some of the audio because it was just so loud, but it was great. And then you hear the voice of Disneyland over the PA talking about when different things are about to start. It was just a very happy, family-friendly environment. And so was Celebration, but Celebration, I mean, the McCormick Place is bigger than the Anaheim Convention Center. But Celebration felt more crowded to me, and I'm not sure about the numbers on either convention as far as how many attendees there were. But D23 is so beautifully spread out and organized that you really can go around and see everything and never feel even the least bit claustrophobic, which I thought was interesting. But both moods are good.
I love the comparison that Mr. Kennedy from Lucasfilm made about the notion that you can actually put your arms out and not hit anybody. Because face it, that's really not an option at San Diego Comic-Con.
No.
By the way, did you do the Star Wars Celebration in Orlando at the Orange County Convention Center?
I did.
How did this stack up compared to that?
I liked it much more than Celebration Orlando. Celebration Orlando was not a highlight. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it didn't feel as seamless and put together in the same fashion. I don't think that convention center is big enough for Celebration anymore, quite honestly. So I thought D23 was a far superior experience for me personally.
Oh, very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing the shot out of a cannon experience you had over that weekend.
Oh, I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm just so, like I said, I've chosen to teach high school seniors for a living, so I like the adrenaline.
Well, trust me, you need it for that convention. Okay, folks, well, when we get back from this commercial break, we spent a good chunk of the show talking about The Mandalorian, but when we get back, we're going to talk about the very first project that Lucasfilm produced for television.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, And LifeLock has tips to protect your identity. Use strong passwords, set up multi-factor authentication, report phishing, and update the software on your devices. And for comprehensive identity protection, let LifeLock alert you to suspicious uses of your personal information. LifeLock also fixes identity theft, guaranteed or your money back. Stay smart, safe, and protected with a 30-day free trial at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Marqeta. When it comes to your payments provider, you can't afford to compromise. Marqeta's modern payment solutions flex with your business without the trade-offs. Stable and agile, secure and innovative, scalable and configurable. If they say you can't have it all, don't believe them. Your business demands more. Choose a payments provider that delivers more. Choose Marqeta. Visit marqeta.com/Spotify to learn more.
And we're back. So again, it's been kind of interesting listening to people talk about, the Jon Favreau's limited series, Dan. How do they describe it? That first Star Wars live action thing for television since Ewoks, The Battle for Endor, which was back in 85?
That sounds about right. A couple years after Return of the Jedi, yeah.
And let's face it, there are people who will, wait a minute. The very first thing that Lucas did for television was that Star Wars holiday special, but you and I both know that was kind of a contracted out thing. I mean,
that's something they're not going to put on the Lucasfilm mantle.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
so it's not going to be openly. Everyone knows it exists, but there's a reason it's not widely available. It's not going to be on Disney Plus. I can tell you that.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, but just to do a quick history there, that what is it? CBS reaches out to Lucas. They get the rights to do a TV special. George, as I understand it, was the one who came up with the concept. The notion of Chewbacca's family, Life Day, that sort of thing. But then they farmed the writing of the actual show out to Ken and Mitzi Welsh, who wrote a lot of special material for the Carol Burnett variety show. And in fact, that's honestly one of the reasons why Harvey Korman is featured in multiple roles in this 98-minute long TV special. I mean, Mitzi and Ken had worked with Harvey. They knew they could rely on him. But Bruce Village, who also wrote on this TV special, he supposedly in the writing room constantly bitched about you're asking me to write jokes for the Wookiees, who talk in growls. They can't. I can't do anything here. I don't have any dialogue.
They don't know how to write Shrewook. That's the.
So. Anyway, but you're right. George didn't necessarily want to put that one on the mantle after it aired back in November of 1978.
We should probably circle back on this around Christmas time because it's got a massive cult following for sure.
Oh yeah. In fact, I think it was more famous for the fact that it was so hard to find, and in fact. I remember, my friend Arlen Miller was so proud that he had a really good dub of it, because it was just
it's
impossible.
It's also famous, by
find.
The way, for being the first appearance of Boba Fett, too.
This is
in
true.
Animated form.
This is true. Mm-hmm. Okay, so, all right, we jump ahead 5 years now. Star Wars Episode 6, A Return of the Jedi is released to theaters. And, what's kind of interesting is that George's daughter, Amanda, just loved the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi. And George, as it turns out, was very fond of the money that the Ewoks plush had earned over the 1983 holiday season. So there began to be discussions about, well, what else could we do to support the Ewoks? What else could we do with these characters? And ABC reaches out and says, look, we'd love to get some sort of a Star Wars TV thing going, and which, immediately set George off because he still had memories of the CBS thing, and it's like, okay, all right, we'll we'll look into this, but the deal is this time around, I'm in control. We don't just farm this out to television writers. We're going to work with Lucasfilm people. But what amazes me, Dan, is they initially didn't seem to learn their lesson, because the very first title of this show was the Ewok holiday special.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was kind of startled to come across that in my research, but and initially I guess it was just supposed to be an hour-long thing. But as they began to sort of ramp up, and they came up with a concept where basically it's Hansel and Gretel meets Tarzan of the Apes.
That's an interesting comparison. Yeah.
Well, it was just the whole notion of they wanted a young boy and a young girl in, a jungle adventure setting among the redwoods. But because the cost quickly began to ramp up, because they wanted to have a consistent look for a Return of the Jedi, which meant, once again going out to the redwoods of San Rafael. Suddenly, this thing costs $3 million, which, compared to the $32 million that Lucasfilm spent on Return of the Jedi, it's a tenth, but it's a lot of money for television. They shoot, I want to say that they're shooting in June, July, and August. I mean, this is what's amazing to me, Dan. They're shooting in June, July, and August. This thing airs in November. In fact, I want to say November 23rd, 1984. So, I mean, the fact that the guys at ILM are able to bump out as many effect shots as they were for this thing is pretty startling. Anyway, the Ewok Adventure airs on ABC, is this huge hit, Dan. 65 million people tune in the Saturday after Thanksgiving to watch this thing. In fact, that's another thing that's kind of interesting between the Star Wars Holiday Special in 78 and the Ewok Adventure in 84, is that they literally, the Holiday Adventure airs the Friday before Thanksgiving, and the Ewok Adventure airs the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I don't know what it is about Star Wars and Thanksgiving. But anyway, it turns out to be this smash hit. And so immediately ABC is like, oh, could we do another one of those? And so that's where Ewoks, The Battle of Endor starts to get geared up. Also, Lucas, who is looking now for ways to support going into the second holiday season with Ewok merchandise, hopefully landing under a lot of Christmas trees, and with the hope of, okay, let's look ahead to the 85 and 86 holiday season. This is why we see the Ewoks, the animated series. Did you ever get to see that?
Oh, yeah. That was always on right after the Droids animated series, which I liked more. But I remember it very well.
In fact, the Ewok and Droids Adventure Hour, part of ABC's Saturday lineup, starting at 9 a.m. September of 1985. Again, to give you some idea of what a canny businessman George was, that because they'd seen just a slight downtick in sales of Star Wars merchandise, he insisted, well, if we're going to do an Ewok show for ABC, we'd like to pair it with a droid series so that, that'll help keep sales of Star Wars merchandise up. Anyway, it's pretty much the same battle plan for Star Wars The Battle of Endor. That shoots, again, up in the Redwoods, May to July of 1985. But again, what I love about this is George evidently, just prior to writing this, or the beginning of the story conferences, he had just seen Heidi on television, and suddenly came in and said, well, what about if Sindel, the little girl from the first Ewok adventure, ends up with like a grumpy old hermit up in the mountains, just like out of Heidi. And the writers are like, the last movie, George, at the end of the Ewok adventure, she was happily reunited, her brother and her, with her mom and dad. And yeah, we're going to kill him.
You got to sell oatmeal. You got to bring in Wilford Brimley.
Well, in fact, I love that you brought that in there, because it turns out Wilford gets the job because you got to understand that Cocoon comes out in June of 1985, but everybody in town is talking about this movie. And in fact, especially the folks at ILM, because they did a lot of the effects. and they saw, what a wonderful performance Brimley had done. So they actually sniped him, cast him for this role out ahead of when Cocoon played. So, when Ewoks, The Battle for Endor airs in November, they have, the star of a summer blockbuster, anchoring this TV movie. Unfortunately, Battle for Endor airs on ABC November 24th, 1985. Not quite the success that the first Ewok movie was. More to the point, by this point, George's daughter Amanda has lost her enthusiasm for these characters, and which is why George decides not to make a third Ewok movie. But they're still obviously very, very much front of mind, because think about it. He goes from working on the second Ewok movie to working on the Star Tours ride film, which is all about how we're going to get on a Starspeeder 3000 and go to the moon of Endor. In fact, as I understand it, the Ewoks that we see in the pre-show film for that thing, those are costumes that are actually used in the Ewok Adventure. They're not from Jedi. The next generation of suits that were done.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And let's see. Again, we always like to hype a Disney connection when we can. And it turns out if, you were a kid during that age and you wound up with the Ewok Adventure or the Ewoks Battle of Endor Storyteller album, well, that was released through Buena Vista Records, which was Disney's recording arm. Also, as a huge fan of the Rankin Bass special, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, one of the things I love about the first Ewok Adventure is it's narrated by Burl Ives, the voice of Sam the Snowman.
That's right.
So, yeah. So, but what are your thoughts about these two, Dan? I mean, they typically these days, when they make them available on VHS or Blu-ray or that sort of thing, they bundle them together.
I remember seeing both of them, and I also remember seeing the holiday special when they all went through when they originally aired. Mm-hmm. And I remember wanting to like them and wanting to watch them because they were Star Wars related. Mm-hmm. But by this time it was 1985, 1986. So I'm 13, 14, 15 years old. So it didn't quite have the magic for me. I mean, there's no Force, there's no lightsabers, there's no Luke, there's no Han, there's no Leia. So while I appreciated some of it, and there were stormtroopers in some of them, it just didn't do it for me the way the other Star Wars things did.
Well, now I have to ask, face it, George gets busy for a couple of years. We've got Indiana Jones and the Lost Crusade and that sort of thing. And mind you, ABC really enjoyed working with Lucas and kept after him about, could we do something else, which is how we ended up with the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles starting in March of 92. Did you watch those, or?
I never watched a single one because Harrison Ford wasn't in it, and that was like my personal protest, which was of course silly. And everyone tells me how wonderful they are, but albeit some of them are a little bit stronger than others. But no, I've never seen them.
So I have to admit, I sampled them. You're not wrong. It felt like kind of a cheat to have Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford. I kept meaning when they shut down production of the series for ABC and then started it up again over at the Family Channel with those 4 standalone films. I tell you what, at some point in the future, if you and I ever have free time again, we should make a concerted effort to watch these things, because I'm told, once you watch these films and watch George learn about new production techniques, set extensions to CGI or that sort of thing, that, face it, this is in production from 92 to 96, that George immediately turns around and uses on Phantom Menace.
Which is great, yeah.
So,
Harrison does make an appearance in one as an older...
One episode.
And he has an eye patch,
yes.
right? Yeah.
Yep. In fact... I remember deliberately going out of my way to catch that one, and it was worth watching him in a snowbound cabin play a saxophone.
Well, yeah. Just what you always dreamed Indy would get to do.
Okay. So, anyway, just to quickly wrap up, Star Wars from a television point of view. We've, of course, got the Star Wars Clone Wars micro-series from November 2003 through March of 2005. Those 3 seasons of those wonderful hand-drawn Gennady Tartakovsky stuff.
Those are awesome.
Just love those. And then August of 2008, we get the Star Wars Clone Wars CG film. And then just 3 months later, we get the Clone Wars animated CG series as opposed to the hand-drawn micro-series starting up at the Cartoon Network. And that runs for 6 seasons, with the 6th season actually being available on Netflix. And as you mentioned, as part of your talk about the Star Wars Plus streaming service, starting in February of next year, we get season 7, 12 episodes. And you got to wonder, there's a part of me that, are we going to get some Ewoks? Because it would, given where they started in television, it would be kind of nice to actually get some Ewoks, or for the very least, a Wookiee or two is a nod to the holiday special.
Sure. Well, that would be interesting. I'm not sure what they've got planned, but my goodness, is it going to be wonderful? I feel like, and you've probably heard this too, that they're pretty much just saying, look, this is going to be it, and it's going to be great. We're going to get to finish it the way we want to. I mean, there's a part of me that hopes that we'll get to see a lot, but who knows where the lore will be after the end of the Rise of Skywalker, so maybe that's what I should be looking forward to.
Yeah, that's that we are in for an interesting couple of years, that, between the the Rogue One prequel series, Mandalorian, and again, just cannot wait for what we're going to see with the Ewan McGregor Obi-Wan limited series. But again, if people want to keep tabs on a lot of that stuff, especially some of what was learned at the D23 Expo, they really need to sort of pivot over to all of your podcasts under the Coffee with Kenobi umbrella.
Yeah. Thanks for saying it. We're on Coffee with Kenobi this week. We had quite a few things going on. We had the D23 Expo. We had a preview show where you, of course, shared the mic with me, and we chatted about that experience. And then I've got a number of interviews from the event, like I said, with Daniel Kennedy, with some of the Imagineers who are building the Galactic Star Cruiser. Drew Taylor, of course, joins me to as we do some commentary on what we learned from the panel, both from the theme parks, Disney Plus, and the studios. We've got some amazing interviews coming up over the next 6 months, to be sure, with different authors and stars, and it's going to be very exciting as we get closer and closer to the hype for the Rise of Skywalker. And Triple Force Friday is not that far away, so look for some great discussion there. By the way, Patreon. We have a Patreon page where you can get access to CWK Pour Over, which is an exclusive podcast where we talk about Star Wars, popular culture, Marvel, all kinds of stuff. I did some behind the scenes of what it's like to cover the D23 Expo on our Patreon show as well.
Oh, well, cool. Okay, so if you enjoyed Dan talking about the show on today's podcast, be sure and go check that out. Again, and notice him get more and more raccoon-like.
That's right.
As the show
but I don't
goes on.
eat garbage, even though Drew says I did.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, speaking of Mr. Taylor, among the podcasts that we do on my side of the fence are Fine Tuning with Drew, where we talk about all sorts of animation news. We, of course, have Disney Dish with Len Testa, where we talk about the Disney parks. Dustin Fuse and I do Universal Joint, where we talk about the Universal parks and resorts. Let's see, and you were talking Marvel and how it took over the D23 Expo. That, of course, is something that Aaron Adams and I cover on our Marvelous Disney podcast. And Michelle Valladolid and I are working up a show about all of the amazing merch that was, there on the show floor at this year's D23. And hopefully we'll have a new episode of I Want That up there in a week or so. Let's see. Beyond that, if you could do Mr. Zehr and myself a favor and head over to iTunes and rate or recommend our show, that helps spread the word about what we're doing. By the way, if you really, really, really like what you're listening to tonight, if you want to head over to Bandcamp and subscribe, that would be very helpful. And
Should we plug? Should we plug Indianapolis and what's going on there?
Oh, God, yes. Okay, we have the Indie Disney meet, and I want to say that's the 21st. Is that correct?
That sounds right. Yeah, it's the second to last Saturday in September, I believe.
Yeah, Dan and I are going to be there. We're going to be doing sort of a looking at Lucasfilm live there at the venue, whose name escapes me. It's at the 4-H Fairgrounds, if I'm remembering correctly.
That's right, yeah.
Been there for 2 years running at this point. It's a great fun, wonderful event, folks. Well worth checking out and for a great cause.
And you'll see Aaron Adams there as well.
Oh, God, that's right. Yes. Well, again, they'll let anybody in. But, but yes, it'll be fun to have Aaron there. It'll be fun to be there with you, Dan. And happy to, answer any of your Star Wars and Disney-related questions while we're there. So
that's right. You'll find us there. You'll find Coffee with Kenobi has a live podcast there as well.
That's true. That's true. Oh, the amazing media keeps on coming. But this show, sadly, is at an end. So on behalf of Mr. Zehr, this is Old Man Hill, and we are signing off for tonight. All right, take care, folks.